Courageous love now. Courageous love now. Courageous love now. Welcome back, beautiful people. Lara Helena here, Courageous Lara of Courageous Love Now podcast. And I have the great pleasure today to welcome my first guest of the year 2022 with this beautiful human, Brendan D. Murphy from Australia, now via Mexico. And before we get started, I would love to just read a little bit about who Brendan is. Author and host of Truth Addict podcast, Brendan D. Murphy has both blown minds and changed lives around the world. He is the author of the epic masterpiece, The Grand Illusion, a synthesis of science and spirituality, Book 1, and founder of the censorship-free Facebook alternative, Truth.network. Brendan's work is designed to push humanity and civilization to greater consciousness, freedom, and health. He does this mainly through his writings, his podcast, and his DNA activation and sound healing work. Brendan D. Murphy, author, speaker, freedom hacker, and truth addict. Welcome, Brendan.
Thanks for having me, Lara.
That was an amazing bio. Thank you. And I'm so sorry for all the notifications popping up on my screen here.
That's all right. Hardly noticed it.
Okay, good. Very good. So from Mexico you are today, and Courageous Love Now being, as you know, podcast I've had going 13 months or 13 episodes, kind of chunked into two months and then nothing for a few months doing my own work. And here I am back again interviewing, and I'm so grateful to have you on today. And having listened to your Truth Addict podcast and your freedom fighting voice for the voice of what's been happening all over the world in Australia, the shifts that are going on. I'm just so grateful to really talk about courage, love, and being in the now, and how this journey has interwoven in your life. And to start, what I would really love is to hear a little bit about you, just kind of what you're up to at this point, and then maybe we can wheel it backwards and find out where it all started. So I'm going to hand it over to you to get us started.
Sure. Well, what I'm up to now, I'm adjusting to living in a very different part of the world now. So we've been in Mexico for about 9 weeks-ish. And we left Australia from the East Coast in the Byron Bay sort of Shire area. And, it was not a decision made lightly, but it was kind of inevitable because the Cooties-19 insanity had just gotten so ridiculous and so suffocating. The psychological atmosphere of Australia was really just, as I said, suffocating. And the focus of everyone just seems to be, the COVID thing just endlessly. And, we were just sick and tired of it, like it was in your face everywhere, couldn't get away from it. Yeah. I was podcasting about it. That was the reason I started up my podcast in the first place after having a break from the GFM media podcast for a few years. It was the scamdemic that made me pick the mic up again, so to speak, and get back into it, because it was, as soon as I looked at it for more than 5 seconds, it was obvious that we were being subjected to a massive psyop. So anyway, we left Australia and got out of that atmosphere, and Mexico has been a little bit more conducive and a little bit more, it just feels energetically a little bit more freer and a little bit more open, less oppressive energetically. So I think it was a good call. We felt better as soon as we got here. And so we're just sort of now kind of like expanding and unwinding a bit and trying to get back in touch with ourselves and our creativity again, because that was really stifled back home a lot. And I see what people are posting now. My friends who are back home still, and they're still very much in the vortex, and it's very hard to get out of that. So I'm glad to not have to be in that environment at the moment.
I very much can relate. For those that have followed my podcast, know a bit of my journey at the level that I've shared it. But coming out of Los Angeles and now in Denmark, it's different but similar for sure. The heavy energy and being sensitive to it was very apparent from the get-go. Um, and I certainly know the feeling to kind of have a little bit more expansion and being close to nature and just not so sucked into that narrative and propaganda wheel, which unfortunately Los Angeles is one of the hearts of it. So I was right at the jugular there, you know. So I feel you. So yeah, well, congratulations for 9 weeks of finding new footing and a new path to be able
Mm.
to expand even further.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I think it was a good
yeah,
call in the end, and we'll probably spend at least a couple of years here. It's it's not an easy journey or transition to make, especially when you got
yeah,
a little uh, toddler running around. It's like
of course.
one of the hardest things you could do. Is just exhausting, but
Yeah,
it was worth the effort.
yeah,
Mm.
beautiful. Well, I would love, I mean, I know that I had a chance to look at your website. I've seen a little bit about your past book, but you also mentioned to me that you have some books that are coming up. Did you want to share anything about that, about your writing, and that I know that that's something that you're really passionate about and kind of where you're standing in right now? Is that something you wanted to share?
Sure. Well, I mean that came about through the whole, the initial sort of awakening that I had, as we were talking off air about that whole thing. So,
Yeah.
that was triggered about 19 years ago. I think I've been in this space now for about that long, and the book was just kind of like the something took over me after that awakening, and it was kind of like, well, I'm not really in charge of my life anymore. I just have this thing that I have to do. And so there's this path that opens up, and
You're on a mission.
you're on a mission. You don't really have a choice. And so the book was kind of like, I started putting that together about 4 years after the sort of initial awakening. And, I just started from the point I woke up and I became very, very much consumed with consuming information and learning and wanting to pull everything together and then communicate that insight in a way that would make sense to people and help them to get to know themselves and reality and that kind of stuff. So that's the nutshell sort of version of what that's all about. And I've had 10 years of in between publishing that first volume, and it's been 10 years since then. So I'm hoping to get the part 2 out later this year as part of the 10-year anniversary of book
Of the
one. So
first one.
yeah, timing's everything.
Yes, that's great. And what better time than to get new information out there, a new perspective. So it's definitely you can feel it, at least in the health and wellness industry. All of a sudden, the yoga and breath work and being a spiritual guide and a light worker is now like, as popular as Starbucks. It's like it's the next wave. So, and that's, if there's going to be something popular, then please let it be people that want to open their minds further. So congratulations
Yeah,
on
yeah, and get to know themselves and do the healing work. And in case in point, to prove what you just said, my brother recently got certified for breath work. So
amazing.
yeah,
That's wonderful. Well, hey, it's I think people laughed at it years ago, and I think still today I don't need to learn how to breathe. I breathe just fine, And then you go to a breath workshop and you're like, wow, I went into the moon and back. Yeah.
yeah, been doing it wrong this whole time.
This whole time. Exactly. Who knew? Well, I mean, and that's, that symptom right there is really the bigger picture of what's going on at a collective level, at least as a witnesser of what I'm seeing. And having been attracted to these things since I was a teenager and gone down the artistic path and traveled the world and having a different perspective of how people can live and cultures and languages and lands and professions, but also coming from that intuitive artistic place, there's so many roads that lead to Rome, so to speak, but that feeling that we have been given and force fed something for so long that no one even questions that there could be another way. But at the same time, there's a collective of people that have always been questioning it, like yourself or myself, and and many others that are like, wait, but I've already known all of this for decades. You guys are now just figuring it out, like breathing properly. I mean, this is just one small piece of the very big picture. And I think that that's, even the birth of Courageous Love Now came from that. It was like something just took over and was like, I have to do this. I have to be an avenue to have a voice. I can't even go visit my friends right now or have a conversation without it being some kind of dispute over some topic. So I'm just going to talk to a microphone and people of like minds that want to talk about the subjects without conflict. So, but that being said, I think it would be really interesting, and just knowing the little that I do about you and knowing that you have some longevity from your experience of that awakening and the book that you wrote and all the things that you've been doing since then. I find it fascinating to really know the human inside, because of course we can all build ourselves up. And I've done that many times in all my different careers as an actor and a dancer, and you stand behind the title that you are now. And now you're an informer and a teacher and a guide for others. But how did the human, the little vulnerable Brendan, get started in having this like reawakening and realigning in who and why you're here? I think that would be fascinating to know.
Well, I mentioned my brother, and he was instrumental in that. He's 3 years younger than me, so at the time he was at school still. He was still in high school, I think, in year 11, maybe year 12. I think year 11. Anyway, so I was out of school for a couple of years at that point, 19, going on 20, and he comes home from school one day and says, we had this dude in who's like 25, this young entrepreneurial guy, and he was supposed to be talking about business, but he kept getting sidetracked and talking about this sort of spiritual book that he was really into. I thought you might be interested in it, and it was called The Holographic Universe. And so you've probably heard of it. Some of your listeners have probably heard of it. It was written by a physicist called Michael Talbot, and I think it was published in 91. Okay. Excuse me. So I said, okay, interesting. Sounds legit. I might be interested in looking at that. Thanks. And did nothing with it for at least 6 months. So I just let that seed. That seed was planted though. He planted that seed, quite innocently. But it was that was pivotal. Him coming home and saying, "Hey, you might want to check this book out that this guy was talking about." So I did eventually, and I think I read it for the first time. Might have been just before we went on a family holiday. We used to take annual family holidays up to a place called Noosa. But anyway, so it was around about that time where I read this thing, and it was it destroyed all of my basic ideas and assumptions about how reality works, about what it means to have consciousness, about what it means to be alive, where humans fit into this puzzle. And it just tore down the model, very haphazard, shabby model of things and reality that I had at the time. It was sort of like a mishmash of like sort of modern science, and then you've got this sort of Christian indoctrination, and this was all kind of jumbled together. So I didn't have a cogent picture of anything, and it destroyed it, just obliterated it, and it made me so. It inspired me so much. It lit me up so much that I read that book like another 3 times. Wow. But in the process of integrating it, I became totally obsessed with, trying to learn more and understand more, and going and reading more. And just it took me off whatever path I might have been on, and it set me down the path that I've been on for, the last sort of 19 years. So that was that key pivotal turning point, that moment of, the light's come on now.
Yeah. So it wasn't like you were going through a horrible time in your life and seeking, you just came upon it. Your brother recommended it, and boom, you had, through reading it dropped all the veils. So
exactly. Yeah. It was just the right time for me to be exposed to that perspective. Amazing. And so I took it and ran with it and never looked back. And I think about four years later, I started actually assembling information and material and writing. And then another 5 years down the track, that became book 1. So I lived in this sort of, on this path, on this mission to inform people and awaken people. I was walking this path, kind of living, while I was writing, I lived as a hermit. I basically, even though I had a partner at the time, for 5 years, I did nothing but study and research and write
Yeah.
full time. So like I wasn't doing really anything else aside from picking up the guitar as well, and maybe playing a couple hours on the guitar. So I was absolutely like single-mindedly devoted to that path and to that pursuit of knowledge. And then, you know, when I was 29, I finally managed to publish the first installment of it. And it's been a long time between drinks. I haven't managed to publish another book since then, but I've continued the study and the research and the development of perspective. I think that's, I'm very much about that, the development of perspective. Anyway.
Yeah. Do you, I mean, would you say that it's, I mean, obviously I've read on your website a bit about it, and you know, how it can help people, but would you say overall it's like consciousness expansion? I mean, it's not taking in, is it spiritual practice, or is it more theory based, or is it more conceptual? I mean, what is the, just to get an idea of like what the book that you read, the Holographic Universe, and then what that kind of transferred into you and you transmuted it into?
Yeah, I guess I'm more interested in the conceptual side of things and the perspective-based side of things. So I'm not that interested in like writing a how-to manual, or, you know, like I don't want to write a breathwork book or that kind of thing. It's not really my jam. I want to be at the you know, the coalface pushing forward into a new understanding of things. I think that's what drives me more than anything, because I know that if people want to learn a skill, there's a million books out there that will teach them the skill, but there's not a million out there that will show them what I'm going to show them.
Right. So basically you took the information you got from that, sparked new thought in you to create something or a concept or an idea, which then you're now sharing through the work that you're doing and through and continuing to do, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, kind of like picking up the baton or carrying the torch forward, you know, from these people who've shown us so much and given us so much, you know, the Michael Talbots of the world, and, you know, the guys like, you know, Carl Jung and what's his name, the guy, I've got his book here, Joseph Campbell, and these types of characters, you know, like who have given us a level of perspective that, you know, you can't just go and read a newspaper and get this kind of stuff. It's like, you know, this is a special line kind of type of work that they do, and I feel like I would like to continue in that tradition in a sense.
Yes, no, it makes complete sense. I mean, as you're talking, I'm reflecting on my own process of taking information of a lot of the things that I've studied and practiced as a dancer and performer, and then getting into yoga and spirituality and, you know, that whole world opening up. But I think the pursuit of consciousness underneath all of that, because I'm a very sensory and tactile and physical person, all those modalities really speak to me, because I can explore that consciousness through the modality. But at the same side of it, what is the pursuit of those different modalities is the pursuit of deepening my own conscious awareness, right? So I understand completely what you're saying, because then you can come out of that. And I can feel that recently, having a lot of research and awareness of my own shadow, but going deeper into heart consciousness. And everyone's, I mean, my verbiage all my life is, you know, love and light and courageous love now. Well, what is love? And of course, then talking about consciousness love. And, you know, so you, as you said, you're getting all these older ideas and concepts, newer ideas and concepts, and then transmuting that into something that is your own. And at least from my own experiential practice of it, I feel like individually, but also collectively, there is something that's being born right now that is new and has never been here. I can't put a word on it, but I can just say from a sensory and a feeling aspect, I can feel that. And you're saying that pretty much the same thing in what you're birthing out of your 19 years of experience and research.
Yeah, there's definitely something interesting happening. And you know, that compression that we're all under, that we've all been under for the last couple of years in particular, is accelerating that mutation. So I mean, it's horrible on one level, but it's also evidently necessary, because, you know, what humans are like, we tend to want to resist change and resist evolving and growing unless it becomes so unbearable. Staying in one place becomes so unbearable that we have to move.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting just to go backwards on my own experience of when this podcast was birthed, it was birthed at a time when I was doing an acting class and different classes. I was doing everything online, right? From my small little town home in LA. And of course, I go into my creative world on this flat screen and then feel, okay, I'm connecting, but then there would end up becoming a political conversation, or somebody would mention something about something. I won't even say the words. And next thing you know, it's like a fire going off and everyone now has 2 cents to say about it. And I was starting to feel choked. And I thought, hold on a second. This is like the only avenue that I have to step into a collective of people of like minds and share something creative. And now even that's being taken away from me by the saturation of fear and narrative and all of that. And I ended up leaving the class and the studio, which I had been for 5 years. So it was really like a hard thing to do. But what I did discover was podcasts, because I had never really listened to podcasts at all. And that summer I came over to Denmark and started, just listening to podcasts, going on long walks on the beach and listening to Aubrey Marcus and, these amazing like podcasts, Joe Rogan and, all these people that were yourself included, and thinking, wow, okay, here I am feeling like I'm alone in a collective that I want to be able to express my art, express my truth, but I don't have the words to say it. And I don't want to just shut down, because that's what's happening. Anybody who is opposing, and there's a larger number of them, I'm getting isolated. And now it's bringing up all my own trauma of being bullied as a kid and, isolated in that aspect. So it was putting me up against a place that the higher me had to look at and say, okay, Lara, that you're not all of these limiting beliefs in your head. That you have something really to bring the world, and you've been doing it through different avenues, but now there's something that's really trying to be birthed. So that process of the birthing process and finding Courageous Love Now was literally where I got the title for the show, and processing it through the show, because sometimes it felt like if I just did a podcast by myself, I just closed my eyes, was like I was going into some kind of channeling of like bringing information through, and I'd get finished feeling like, wow, that was amazing. That's not something I actually thought about. This is a concept that came through right here in the present moment, So where was I going with this? Yes, leading me to kind of the moving forward, that so many of the, how do you say, sorry, I'm trying to remember where I'm going with this, because I started this off of something you said and I went off on a tangent. Okay, I'm going to come back to it. Yeah, it was just basically saying, leading forward, that awareness of yourself when you're coming upon something new, and how to hold that inside yourself in a container that that you can trust it, because it's not like anything that anyone else is doing or saying, and how to put a word on it. So, I mean, from what I hear you saying, that's a little bit like what you've been doing, and just getting the teachings, the guidance, the wisdom from others before you to push you in the direction of saying, yes, Brendan, you're on the right path. Keep going. Right? I mean, is that?
Yeah. I mean, I've done a lot of the gathering of other people's perspectives, and it wasn't, when I think I came out firing, as soon as I had that little sort of activist gene wake up in me, I was like, you need to know about this. You guys need to know about this. And, that was before we had any of the social media stuff that we're all using now. So it was like, I found out about Scientology and, what that is. And then I started sending people emails, and, not everyone appreciated that.
Yeah.
But, that's like kind of, you grow your feathers, and, your skin toughens up, so to speak. And I never really attempted to have like a container in myself, to like a protective space. I immediately wanted to share and communicate. And I learned by doing that, ways to go about it and ways to not go about it. And, it's just like you kind of trial and error. And I just, that's my design, my basic kind of archetype is to always want to project it out, and not hold back, and then just let the chips kind of fall where they may, because at the end of the day, if someone can handle what you're saying, then that's great. They've reached a point of growth where they're able to. If they can't handle it, they haven't reached the point of growth where they're able to. It's kind of like, right. It's not really for me to control like the outcomes and people's responses. I'm not in charge of that sort of thing. So there's a level of security or of self-worth, like a base level of self-worth and security within yourself you've got to have to be able to go doing this kind of work, or to start your podcast and tackle controversies and not really care at the end of the day if people are outraged at you or whatever. Like, it just,
I can't believe you said this, or I can't believe you think that, or right.
Exactly.
Yeah. And being the truth averse, which is many different flavors of truth, as you said, from the different people that you're interviewing and wanting to hear their voices. And and now we see, even since you started that, how even that in itself is, you're not allowed to speak about many things that you might have an opinion about, or a truth that you stand behind. It's so going back to the birth and the volcanic eruption that's happening, of people wanting to come together and feel that collective of something is rumbling under the earth. And it's about to blow.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm curious, as far as spiritual practice, is there anything that you've been doing, any different things over the years that you found supportive, whether it was something physical or a breath work, as we said, or a book that you read that really was like, oh, this was amazing, to kind of keep you personally on track? Or do you feel like you've had a real sense of center and knowing throughout these 19 years?
Yeah, I guess it's sort of the latter. I think I probably have a fairly obsessive personality anyway. So, so there was, once that switch was flicked, there was no going back, and there was never ever going to be any other outcome. I just don't care about other things the way that I care about doing this. And I had a friend many years ago asking me, why didn't I have a job? And I was, I don't know, I don't want one. That world's not for me. And so eventually, you can see, if you look back at your own timeline, your history, you see a level of a pattern starting to emerge and forming it. But you asked about practice, and I think I don't have one now. When I started the journey, I was attending a spiritualist church for a while, from the age of 20 to 22. And I was meditating in the trance meditation group, and I was meditating at home, and that was my way of, connecting spiritually and having those deep kind of high level connected sort of peak experiences, and that was great for a couple of years. I was working on trying to activate the clairvoyance and all this kind of stuff, and it was working, but unfortunately it's like a lot of things, and it's like, if you don't use it, you lose it. So that kind of got derailed, and I never really went back to it. But it's not really, it's not in the phase of my life. It's sort of, I think it's worth sort of taking stock of your life trajectory and your pattern and who you are and your dharma, and seeing what is most appropriate for you to do, and what is most appropriate or authentic, and how, what is an authentic expression of me right now. And it's not sitting and meditating. That's just not part of the deal right now. So, I just do my thing, and I encourage people to do what's real for them. If it's real for you to pick up your guitar and play for a couple hours, if that's how you connect spiritually, if that's what keeps you sane in an insane world, awesome.
Yeah, beautiful. I remembered what I was going to say earlier, that I got sidetracked because it was around creativity, because that was that I got disconnected from my creative circle at the time. And I had this sense that there was a new renaissance that was going to be born, that there was, this suffocation of the possibility of expressing yourself, whether it be through singing a song, going to a party, hugging someone, talking to a friend, or literally creating art and putting it out there. This suffocation of creativity was going to be the birth of a new way, right? So that was what I was going to say, and that was a lot around where Courageous Love Now, being an artist and feeling, of course, a spiritual connection to it, and the creative aspect of it, that having courage to stand in love, no matter the concept, whatever is in front of you, love meaning my truth, and do that right now. One of the questions that I've posed to people that I've interviewed is about their creative process, because that's something I'm also been very fascinated about, because I've felt over the course of my journey a very big similarity between the zone that I go into as a performer and the zone that I go into when I'm meditating. Kind of what you said, if you feel that you connect when you go into your guitar, somewhat like the same thing. But do you feel with writing, and obviously on all the different topics that you're writing, do you feel like you're going into a certain zone, like a trance of like 5 hours can pass and you've read these books and you're writing and you're, is it the same type of process for you in what you're doing?
Yeah, exactly what you're saying. It's exactly that. It's like I don't have the ability to sit here for like 12 or 15 hours, but in terms of the rest of my life that needs dealing with,
Yeah.
but it would be the easiest thing in the world for me to sit here for 12 hours and write nonstop. Like this, it's like a fish in water, boom, like that's just the easiest, most instinctual thing. Like it's so easy to do that it's almost problematic because other things need doing as well. So
yes.
for me, I have to find balance in a personality structure that doesn't really take well to balance.
Yes.
So yeah. And picking up the guitar is the exact same thing. Like if I was given the opportunity to just write, say I was working on an album today, I would pass 8-10 hours like that, and that's where writing in music, or with the fingers on the keyboard, it's kind of the same thing. Like that's where I'm most connected
in your zone.
Definitely.
Amazing. Yeah, it's something for everyone, and I know that that's like also the exploration of trying new things in different areas. And coming from a spiritual organization that I was involved with, and I was involved with for 20 years, and I had a regime and a practice that I followed. And coming out of that 5 years ago, it was kind of like, oh, I'm free. I can do whatever I want. I don't have to follow this practice. I don't have to do this thing every day. I don't have to, and so that exploration, not like a kid in the candy store, because I definitely didn't go like overboard, but really just listening intuitively. What was my way, not the way that was, put on me from dogma or belief systems or anything else, and of course I've always been a free spirit to just follow my intuition and pick up and travel to another land or backpacking around Europe or whatever, when I was in my teens and stuff. But do you feel in going back to your 20 years ago, I guess, when you were 20, when this all launched, what was your background then before you read this book? Did you have already that kind of sense of knowing of where your path is, and you said, oh, what I was doing was no longer what I was doing? You went down this path after you read this book. Did you have a sense of like, oh, I'm gonna go and be a lawyer? Or was it completely etch a sketch to a new direction, or did you already have some kind of vision of?
Well, I mean, I think I was pretty lucky in terms of not being attached to a particular idea at the time. At school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. It was pretty sort of open and vague. And I thought I was kind of leaning in the direction of maybe going into something like medicine or something connected to health in some way. But that didn't work out. And I'm very grateful that I never went into medicine because, having developed a lot of knowledge around what that's all about, I would not want to be a participant in it. So, and when you're 19, there's not a lot of sort of, as a 19-year-old, you don't even have a fully formed prefrontal lobe. So I didn't have much of a life experience or anything to draw from. And it was, I think, good in a sense that it was like, okay, this guy's got really nothing. He's kind of like a blank slate. Aside from really loving music, he doesn't really have a path set in mind. So as soon as that seed was planted, it was game on. Like that was what I needed. That was
like the DNA awakening.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it was like,
yeah,
that's the path it was for me. And so I'm on it now.
Yeah. Beautiful. So speaking of which, and my computer just shut down, so I can't see in your bio, but I don't remember the name of it, but your DNA activation sound healing, is that what it is? DNA activation sound healing?
Yeah. So that's,
can you tell us about that?
Yeah, no problem. So I have a program called Evolve Yourself, which the core of it is the DNA activation work, which was it's actually called the Regenetics Method, and it was developed by a friend of mine called Sol Luckman, who's based in the States.
Regenetics. Regenetics. Sorry, I didn't catch that. Yeah.
Regenetics Method, and it came out of he was he was very badly affected by some injections. He got a couple for travel. This is probably 20 years or so ago. And he was very badly affected by it. It completely destroyed his health on every level. And so he spent 10 years trying to find a solution, trying to find a way back to being healthy. Yes. And what happened was he found a Qigong teacher, and that sort of got him on the Qigong thing, but he felt better. But the problem he had with that was if he missed a day or two, he would slide back downhill again, and he would start feeling really crappy. So he realized that wasn't getting to the roots of the injury. And through a process of a lot of, I guess, exploration and some introspection, he actually had some spontaneous, if you like, downloads in terms of he would wake up from sleeping, and he would have this code, a set of codes in his head, like vowel sequences representing information, and they were to be chanted. And he found when he did this, when he chanted them in this particular way, following the method, I won't get into the specifics of it, but it began a massive rejuvenation and healing process for him. And eventually he ended up downloading 4 separate lots of these activation codes, and completely restored his health from a position where nobody could help him at all. So
wow.
I met him through both being authors. We connected through that many years ago. I think it was 12 years ago now, roughly. And so I underwent this process myself, and I realized through the results that I had and the experience that I had with it that it was well worth sharing. Yeah. And doing some of this work.
So he shared his practice with you, and you. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So I read his book, and I learned the procedure, and I started doing it for people as well. So those activations represent the core work of the Evolve Yourself body process or program, which is what how I work with people. That's I guess the closest thing to working with people one-on-one that I'm doing at the moment.
Yes.
So we do these live activations as part of the Evolve Yourself program, and it's when you look at the kinds of outcomes that Sol had in terms of regenerating his health, and I had great experiences with it, and I've had some really amazing feedback from people who've worked with me. So it's one of these evolutionary type of things. It's not like you're not doing something repeatedly. It's not one of these practices that you need to do every day. It's a transformational experience. It's a transformational event. So it's not something you need every day. You just do it once. Wow. And then you need like an integrated period. Yeah. So between the first activation and the second, there's actually a 5-month gap where you're integrating that material and that process and that information, because your body physiologically has to go through a process. It's like it is related to Kundalini activation as well, so which you would know about. So if you have that activation, there is a process of integration that has to happen. And absolutely. Sometimes you read about people having horror stories of uncontrolled spontaneous Kundalini activation. It's like the Gopi Krishna experience, which was horrendous. So it's great to have a process that's systemized and gentle and repeatable and not unpredictable.
Yes. No, I mean it's, and this is beautiful because I just listened to a gentleman yesterday. I think he was a talker on a breath summit that I just looked his name up from the title of what he was doing. And it was DNA something code. I'm trying to remember now. I can't recall. Anyway, his whole journey is kind of through codes and getting, each person has their own code, but it's then through frequency and sound and all of that. And when we, he's got a download that it was like, if I can meet the person, I'll understand right away what their code is just from their frequency that he's able to read, and he's able to give them something. So it sounds, again, with new information coming through all the time. And that's what I think, at least from what I've recognized in the last 24 months, that so much of this new awareness, and you said this guy you've known him for 12 years, but not only, and he was saying that a lot of this was actually written in Tibetan wisdom, that this was going to happen at this time, that things were going to start to be revealed and would information would be awakened, and we ourselves are kind of like the vessels that hold it, like a book, like the words, like the code, like the frequency. And each one of us, when we come together, are somehow unlocking each other's codes to one, and as a collective, of course. I heard just talking with another friend of mine last week around the concept of soul groups, that it's the time that soul groups will start finding each other, and once we start to reactivate, we're going to reactivate something. So it's interesting because this is a dialogue that I haven't heard. It's all dialogue that at a certain level makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know enough about it. And even what you're saying, as soon as you said it, it was just like my whole body went, of course, and this is exactly, as you said, it's the knowledge that's coming through right now that we can't really put words to it, but it's resonating with something in us that is a knowing, right? Yeah.
There is definitely like an evolutionary kind of an impulse
Yes.
that's gathering steam
Yes.
through humanity. And I think we're going through an experience that is probably totally unique in the history of humans. And maybe sort of similar things have happened, but I think there's a galactic level to it. There's a cosmic level to it, and where we're going through shifting energies coming out of the earth, the sun, all of this galactic center, and then we have this continuous kind of process that humans have been going through, where we have developed the capacity to abstract our own awareness and our own consciousness and make it it's sort of, how do you put it, we've become more reflective, we've become more sophisticated in terms of conceptualizing what it is to simply exist, and to be able to have a mind, and what that means, and to have a consciousness and what that means. And so we're going through now a process where that is, I think, accelerated to the point where we're able to introspect and conceptualize and abstract in ways that we've never ever done before, but particularly on a collective level like this, because now we're so interconnected. We've got the internet, everybody's online. And so now there's this sort of mirroring and feedback, this incredible network of feedback that's constantly coming in, and we're like, it's accelerated beyond anything we've ever had. So it's a very interesting time.
Yeah, somewhat, multiverse, the multi-dimensions of the multiverse, right? When you look at it and feel it, at least that's something that comes through to me a lot. And I've been practicing a lot of heart work, and just kind of going into really seeing that, at least from my own work right now, I'm not in the knowing in any way, shape, or form. I'm just a humble student. But the work that I've been doing on just shadow work and going deeper into heart stuff and heart wounds and breaking open and accessing, quote unquote, God, source, the infinite universe, whatever you want to label it as, through that access of the disbelief in myself, the limiting beliefs that have held my heart shut, right? So I call this like the portal to ascension is my heart, right? And when we think about the earth being the heart in the chakra of our planetary system, that was something I heard just recently, and I was like, of course it is, and we're all going through heart awakening right now. I'm like, of course, we have to break down the shadow that is keeping us from accessing our truth, which is in love, one divine Christ consciousness, right? There's so many names that are coming from so many different directions, and that idea of the multiverse and things being multidimensional and moving into the 5D, and these terms that I heard a decade ago that I was like, what are you talking about? It was like, you guys are super woo woo, or what are you smoking, or right, where I got it to a certain level that I was capable of getting it. And now I'm sitting here laughing at myself thinking, wow, I've heard these terms for years, but I didn't have the experiential knowledge to really understand them from the inside out. I got them through the mind in. And I think, as you're saying, that's now there's something happening innately with humans collectively across the planet because of the suppression of information and knowledge and the silencing and the et cetera, ... We are being forced to go deeper inwards. We're not in the habitual mode anymore of life as is. And we have to look, right? And because of that suppression, we're going into the pressure that's on our hearts and going, okay, something needs to break free, right? I mean, at least from my own experience, that's what I can witness and feel as a collective of like, people just being hungry for something new. And like, I can't go back to the normal. When everyone's like, oh, it's the new norm. I'm like, oh, I don't want to go back to any norm. I don't want to, what is normal, So it's, it's just very interesting indeed.
Yeah. And the things that drive, for example, climate cycles, the celestial dynamics that drive climate change across the solar system are the same dynamics that actually are pushing us to evolve and to grow. They're the same. There's the same energy and information that's pushing us out of our normal and into whatever this transition is and what it's going to look like on the other side. So we're not really responsible for that. We're not in control of it. We just kind of have to ride the wave and see where it takes us. And you talk a lot about the heart, and I think that's the heart's the point of stability. That's sort of that's how you maintain balance going through this kind of chaotic, insane time that we're going through. And I've found that it's a very important thing. I mean, it's very fundamental. Like, that's one thing that the spiritual people generally get right, is the need to be connected to the heart and to have love, to have compassion, and all this kind of stuff. Forgot what I was going to say now. But unfortunately, it's very easy to go off on a tangent and to put the blinkers on and to filter out the stuff that's not so love and light. And then you end up kind of turning into a caricature of yourself, because you're not dealing with the rest of who you are and the rest of humanity. And you're reflected in humanity, and it's reflected through you. So whatever's happening around you is probably a reflection of something internal, some part of your internal condition, your psyche. And I think what I was going to say was the heart connection and all that that side of things. It's been really interesting to me to watch as humanity has become very extremely polarized over the last 2 years. It's like you're either in this camp where you're completely indoctrinated and don't have any original thoughts, or you're over here kind of questioning things and thinking through things. And even with that polarization, my personal experience of people has been that even the people who've gone and had the 3 doses, overwhelmingly, and I keep meeting them here in this place we live in, because it's that kind of a demographic, slightly older population. And I keep meeting them all the time, without trying to. And it's like, I get sucked into conversations, and that's one of the things that having a baby does, is that she attracts people, right? So you end up in conversations. And every time I end up talking to one of these people who are very much in the indoctrinated sort of camp, I am struck by what, lovely, friendly people they invariably are, and it's like, it's very easy to have a conversation with most of these people. Obviously, you can't talk about certain things, but they mean well, and they basically have good hearts. And that's been in my face a lot, and it's been weird, because, we're frustrated. If you're awake to what's like to the manipulation side of things, it's very frustrating. And then you're frustrated at these people who are so gullible, but at the same time, you can't really hate them, because they're really lovely and they mean well, and they're just kind of uninformed and confused. And so the heart is kind of like that point of stability, that anchor that helps you kind of navigate and walk the middle path through all this insanity, instead of being polarized and getting angry at them and all this sort of thing. I had to process quite a bit of anger and frustration through this last 2 years, because of what was going on around me. And it was like, come on, you gotta be freaking kidding me. So it's like you say, like it's right, it's correct, like the heart and the love.
It's so, you're hitting on topics that I'm just like, pew, pew, pew in my mind. But the first, going back to the magnetic energy, and that was something that I've been acknowledging, because I could feel a real resonance with me being in Denmark. And I was kind of like, I wonder what's happening at that polarity of the planet, and why am I feeling so much better here than in Los Angeles, which I used to feel so open and connected to. And an astrologer said to me, oh, maybe it's just the ley lines, and it's the this and the that. So it was something with really following a few sites that talk about the Schumann resonance and the CMEs and everything happening every day. So that was like really tuning me in to the awareness. And then I think coming into the heart wisdom, of course, going through my own shadow work and going deep into forgiveness of family members and wrongs that were done to me, and that aspect of it. But as you just said, clearly, as a collective, and the polarization and the dualistic mindset of love and fear, and I've not ever been one that followed like Christianity or the Bible or anything like that. But I kept getting a call in the last couple of years that it kept popping into my head, or I'd hear it in different podcasts around Christ consciousness. So I was like really investigating about a year and a half ago when I was doing podcast following, what this was and listening to different things. And it has only just been in the last couple of months, as I went through some big Kundalini stuff and ego death and, and an awakening, that it, again, what I said before with like these ideas and concepts and books that I read, that it was like, it sounded in it, I got it here in a place of my imagination, but it didn't reside in my body. And that, I think, is something where me being a teacher of dance and vocalization, and it's something that I've been doing forever, being in my body and embodying what that practice of what it is, but bringing in these new concepts have been hitting me in such a new way. And I think that that's where the multidimensional idea comes in. As the information is turning and vibrations are changing, of course, healing a lot of my lower stuff and the anger and the unseen things that I didn't allow myself to see, as I spiritually hijacked it most of my life. That being one part of it. But the other part of it, as you just said, really asking yourself, I think what's really been coming through is that we are all mirrors of each other. And when you talk about the hologram of consciousness, I think about it as like we are all in this like big disco ball reflecting our light out, but we're all a part of one collective, right? So that supra consciousness or of humanity, and how to be connected with that. How do we that be the change you want to see? Or, if I just choose love every day, it will change around me. Well, some people will say, well, that's stupid and passive, and you don't have any ability to have an effect on the world, right? But I've known all my life and practiced it. Okay, I'm going to meditate for peace, or I'm going to do this action. But coming now from an experiential stance of like living my own process of healing certain thorns in my heart, or wounds that were keeping a certain part of that dimension closed off. And because I was able to go in and go to the core wounds and take it off, whether it be ancestral or whether it be, present day, and allowing that place to open and to really move through it in a place of surrender and like, let go and let God, or, surrender into the hands of the one. And, coming back to that idea of the whole, I can feel it in an experiential way, but also my consciousness gets it in a way like what you were talking about, of getting this concept in a book, of like helping you have a new perspective of what consciousness really is, and how do we go after that and spread an evolution and an elevation of consciousness in why are we here and what are we doing and what's our purpose. And, when people are walking around like habitual robots, and like you said, they're super beautiful, heartfelt people, but they're like on the treadmill of life, and they're not seeing that there's another option over here. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on that because it's definitely something that's been coming through a lot for me in the heart work, is feeling who this thing over here that triggers me is a reflection of me. What is the work that I have to do in myself in order to make peace with this thing that is really getting under my skin and making me want to fight, and throw stones back, et cetera. So, I mean, you having a pathway of controversy and speaking truth and knowing that you're rubbing up against the edge of many different topics, how do you see that? Like, how does that feel, or how do you see that in your perspective of where you're at in developing and growing consciousness, and also being a rebel with a cause, so to speak?
Are you sort of asking how I navigate like the two sort of polarities?
just from what you're saying of like meeting people and feeling like, oh, they're really coming from their heart, but gosh, hello, wake up and smell the coffee, so how do you navigate that in your daily basis of like where we're going as a collective of coming back to the heart, but also knowing, oh wow, this is all a reflection of myself and the consciousness that we're living.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I guess, on a day-to-day basis, I tend to mind my own business in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I meet people, I'm not looking to have a debate or an argument about, I'm not trying to impress my perspective on somebody who I know is never going to agree.
Yeah.
And there's no point really in having those types of interactions. It doesn't really achieve anything. And I just feel like, maybe it's the pacifist in me, maybe it's the part of me that's always like to avoid confrontation, which is part of my shadow work I've had to do, is deal with that side of it. But there's a way that I can have a constructive or useful interaction with someone, and it doesn't involve talking about the way that we've been manipulated over the last 2 years, unless they come and say something to me that invites me to step into that role of, education and informing, whatever. Yeah. So I would rather find ways to build, I have a group of friends who I can talk to freely, and, everything's on the table, everything can be up for discussion. Most other people don't have the capacity to have those kinds of free discussions, and that's just fun. It's like, that's something I've had to negotiate with and come to peace with, is that most people don't want to know what they don't know. And they don't appreciate being told what they don't know, unless you're imprinted in their psyche as an authority figure who they imprinted and conditioned to listen to. And so, it's, I don't even know if I'm answering your question, but that's part of it.
No. I mean, it's very much so. And that last part is, I think, very powerful, because, in reflecting how I have held space to just listen to people without want to press my own opinion in the last 2 years has been few and far between, because I've also been at a fight with myself because I want to stand in my truth and rub up against something that I don't believe is fair, or I believe is wrong, or whatever. So I'm doing my own work, even by having this conversation, to say, okay, do I really sit and listen to the other side? Do I really sit and hold space for that opinion without letting it be like a catalyst under me to light my fire and want to be like, oh, I can't handle this conversation, I'm leaving, whatever, because it's rubbing something wrong inside me, right? So I don't know. I think with you bringing that up, I just think it's a really interesting point, at least where I'm at in the journey, that like you, I've avoided most of my life conflict. I'm a peacemaker. I want harmony. I want good feelings and good vibes. But something awoke in me, as I said, and when we chatted before the meeting, before turning on the recording, around this Joan of Arc, Sarah Connor from Terminator woke up, and I was like, give me my Jeep and my machine gun and my dog, and I'm going through the desert and I'm ready for the apocalypse. It was like this warrior part of me came to life, but it was like, now what do I do with this energy? Because I know it's a new energy that's moving through me. And somebody who's never really been able to be, quote unquote, angry or to be confrontational, all of a sudden getting literally a Kundalini awakening of, okay, you've been suppressing this all your life. Now it's time. The floodgates are open. What are you going to do with it? So personally, my last year, I had fits of rage and anger, and blew off on people and family members, and was like a superhero that just discovered I have flamethrowers coming out of my wrists and I'm burning shit down all the time. And I'm like, sorry, I didn't know. I didn't mean to, so I'm reflecting on it, because of course there's a consequence for every action. And I'm trying constantly to be the experiencer, but learn right away. I don't like to fall down more than once. And if I do, then I'm like, oh, this is a big lesson. So what do I really need to look at? So I think that, yeah, that message of how, in what you're doing is being a support to people to evolve. How do we go into this chapter? How do we move smoothly through this chapter without falling on our face so many times around what is right and what is wrong? What is your truth and what is my truth? I don't know. I mean, I'm just opening this as it's birthing right now, but what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I guess that's the question of the day, really, isn't it? How do we how do we move through this? Um, I think that, you know, there's the middle way is to be internally connected to yourself, connect to what's real for you, and to constantly be vigilant around, you know, your responses to things, your, you know, whether you're activated by something, and to not be, not to not fall into the trap of being, you know, a victim, and that's the way a lot of society is programmed, is to function as a victim, and it rewards that in a lot of ways. So really, I think practicing self-awareness, as like dull and boring and unglamorous as that sounds, is kind of the key, because it's like we all know who we want to show up as. We all have some idea, like an idealized version of ourselves, that we would like to think that we are, or, you know, can conduct ourselves as. But if you're not practicing self-awareness, then you're probably falling pretty far short of that ideal. And also, I mean, it's not in having an ideal, you've got to watch out for disowning, you know, parts of the shadow, and building up something that's inauthentic and fake, and shiny, and everyone's going to love me kind of thing. But to be real and authentic, and to understand, like, what are we doing here? What is this experience about? I mean, everyone has their own views on that. I tend to think that this is like, basically, we're in a simulation event that we've constructed as, you know, dreamers in a dream, and we're in the dream that we're dreaming. And part of the challenge is to navigate that by walking the middle way, and to not be polarized and pushed this way and that, because it's a creation that you've created. So it's sort of like everything becomes a challenge or a test, in a sense. Like, okay, here's somebody who disagrees with you. Now you're going to get activated and get really angry and lose your shit. Okay, well, you failed that test. You're going to have that experience again and see how you go next time around, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
Kind of like this video game that we're in.
Yeah.
And so it's really boring and unglamorous to say something like practice self-awareness, but that's kind of the key and what it boils down to. And it's like to allow people to understand that you have your path, and that everyone else has their path, and that we don't get to decide what somebody else's path is. And if their path is to go and have the third dose, that's their path. And you can't, you know, you're not here to run a dictatorship. That box has already been ticked. So, you know, we are individuals who are here having an individual journey through this matrix that we've dreamed up. And it's kind of like, okay, well, how are you going to come out the other side of it? Are you going to come out having, you've developed the, what is it, like a sort of magnanimity, a sort of equanimity, and understanding that, walking that middle path, and not being pushed off it and triggered and all this sort of stuff and polarized. Mm-hmm. That's kind of, in a way, that's a lot of the challenge to me. And you know, being awake in a world full of people who are asleep is really kind of like, on a lot of levels, that's been the ultimate challenge on a personal level, because I'm like, it's so obvious that this is bullshit. What are you doing? What are you thinking? You know, and then you have to negotiate with that and reconcile that, and that's their path. That's their path. Like, you know, you don't have to lie down if someone wants to you know, to hit you over the head with a baseball bat, and let them do it. You don't have to, like, you have a right to stand your ground and to defend yourself and protect yourself. But, you know, there's a fine line between sort of having the warrior mentality and understanding how to carry yourself as the warrior internally, being internally guided from the heart, from awareness, from a place of awareness, as opposed to being a warrior who wants to go and burn everything down that they don't agree with and trash it. You know, it's like, and it's a challenge, because part of me is part of my archetypal structure is the destroyer. The destroyer is very prominent. So finding a way to utilize that energy constructively. To destroy constructively, if that makes sense, that's part of my challenge as well.
Yeah. No, destroy constructively. I like that. Yeah. No, but it makes complete sense. I mean, I was thinking as you were talking about, let me see if I can just come back, because you said a lot there and it was really beautiful. Just taking responsibility. You said, like, you know, having conscious awareness, but like being radically responsible for every move that you make, every thought, every action, right? I mean, if you go back down to like the the monk, walking on the street, one foot in the other, ringing the bell, like every moment matters. And as you said, we are the creators of this universe, of this world and this matrix that we're living in. So every thought, every word, every action is cultivating that next creation in the multiverse. So how do we take back when we're having this internal reaction? As you said, how do you constructively go through your heart, use your consciousness, and do it in a constructive way that it's going to be for the betterment of mankind, when other people have a belief system that, oh, what I'm doing is for the betterment of mankind, I'm just doing it in a violent way, or etc. Right? It's fascinating. I mean, the idea that there is no duality in the minute it's something I've been listening to recently, some different talks, and the idea that there's this shift from duality of like love and fear, war and peace, and this whole construct of duality is the matrix that we live in, and this idea that we're moving out of duality and more into unity. That's obviously a conversation that a lot of people are having, and how that potentially looks. What if you say there is no fear, like there is no spoon, right? That there is no fear, there's only love. Well, if there's only one way and there's that unity consciousness, then we are going to shift. And as you said, that's what I wanted to dive into. When you were talking about before around the DNA activation and this awareness of our taking responsibility and of our consciousness, the more that we're, as a informer, the more that you're informing people of how amazing and how powerful they are, and they don't need to be a victim, because as you said, so many people are walking around asleep or playing into the roles of the victim, and that's the narrative and the propaganda wheel that we're witnessing. The more, at least from what I can feel from the stance I'm in, and I can recognize in yourself, of being that person that wants to help elevate consciousness, to show people how powerful they are, their own abilities to transmute this old paradigm that we've been in, go and step into this new world of unity consciousness, and to really acknowledge that we are the only ones that have the power, that no one has power over us. It's not someone who's going to come and strike you down. Yeah, there's the tyranny, and there's the dictatorship, and there's the fear mongers, and there's the, all of that are holding their own illusionary matrix over us to say, yeah, if you don't do this, then this is the consequences. So yeah, it just came through now. And I think that that's, at least in looking for the hope in the bigger picture of how this dualistic struggle and fight of polar opposites can come together and hold space in the heart of stepping into that new world, in taking responsibility of, hey, I'm superhuman and you can be too. We're all, you hear people say we're all God. We're all an image and a sliver of the face of God. We're all a piece of that one coming together. How to do it? Well, try this and try that. Is there any timeline? I don't know. But at least that's what, the reflections that have been going on for me a lot lately. And at least I can hear that from your share just now. It's
I like that you actually mentioned the word responsibility, because that's kind of what I was driving at. That's a lot of the issues that we actually have, and a lot of the challenges that come up on a personal level, but collectively, is down to the abrogation of responsibility, the fact that we are not taking responsibility for what we think, for how we feel, for what we eat, for what we do with our bodies. I mean, it's like, and then we outsource the responsibility to some government agency or some, the health department or whatever. And it's like, you fix it. Why do I have cancer? Why am I injured after receiving that last injection? It's your problem, you fix it. And that's so much of the challenge is radical responsibility, because then it's like, if you go down that road, it's like everything becomes an opportunity for growth, everything becomes an opportunity for experience, and the experience that you then can derive learning from, derive insight from. And it's the someone who's radically responsible is really if they've mastered it, which I don't know, what does that look like? But they aren't in the victim mentality anymore. They're not looking at things going, oh, poor old me, why is this happening to me? Someone fix this. It's like, okay, what is this giving me an opportunity to grow through, to grow beyond? What is this giving me an opportunity to heal about myself? What part of myself have I disowned here that I need to look at? That kind of stuff. And if we did that on a collective level, and if we'd been, say, just hypothetically doing that for, say, the last 10, 20 years, it never would have been possible for the last 2 years of manipulation to take place. It never would have been possible, because all of those people wouldn't have been outsourcing the responsibility to all these external agencies and entities.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I mean, that is a big sign. And I think the wake up call truly for the collective of humanity that are really conscious seekers and wanting to grow humanity and see that, I mean, even in ancient scriptures, as I said, Tibetan and American Indian, all these have said, since 2012 and then, right? So we can see that in some way it's been predicted that this is kind of going to be the direction and something big is going to happen. Was it prime fertilizing hour? Yes, absolutely, because they got us exactly where they wanted us, and they knew from following us all on all the different platforms, ooh, they're only focused on these things. So this looks like a good time for them to be in their sleepy shadow of their matrix to dive in and plant, the seeds of destruction that we want to do. And it's fascinating. I mean, yeah, fascinating on so many different, the multidimensional level of being a witness to it and a participant in it, and knowing that I want to do and will spend my last breath to continue to move in the direction of unity consciousness and oneness and healing and love, and trying to find the way in which, without pushing my will on anyone, to help those that want to help themselves. And I think, if you look at any of the prophets that we know in our history, and there's been many, isn't that what everybody wanted to do? And isn't that, yes, we have different, now we have a time when I feel like every podcast I listen to is another, I don't want to say prophet, but do you know what I mean? It's like another person standing for something that as a collective we're really hoping for, to really see that we can change the world by changing ourselves. And as you said, you can't expect someone else to do it for you. No one is going to go into your mind and change you except you. So be the change you want to see, right? And how do you do that? One day at a time. And then most people are like, no, instant gratification. I want it now. When am I going to lose that weight? When am I going to get that car? When am I going to get? When am I going to get? So we're like this continual black hole of fill me up so I can keep running away from myself. And that's, I mean, when you look at the propaganda wheel that started back in the 40s, let's continually like wave the glittery thing over here, so they look at something, the magic trick that's going on while we're slipping around the back corner. It's like, and now we're like, oh wait, what's under this curtain? Oh, okay, now I see where the Wizard of Oz does all his tricks. So it's yeah, it's gosh, it's such a fascinating dilemma, but also really intriguingly exciting at the same time, for being at least in the perspective of feeling the potential of what's coming. Because I can't even really imagine it. All I can do is feel that there's greatness and there's something so big that we can't even wrap our intellectual minds around, but our DNA knows that it's coming, right? I don't know, I guess that's like a little bit of what you were talking about, DNA activation. I feel it sometimes, and I'm a very feeling person, and it's like, okay, is this just an emotion? Are these hormones? What's going on? Or am I having, an experiential moment with the cosmos and the energy around me, and something is coming through, like you said, of like channeling and all of this. I mean, I've gone through in the last year, because I was seeking it deeply. Like, I know something is trying to come out, something is kind of come through, whether it's coming this way or this, I don't know. Is it interlocking? I'm not sure which way, and not making myself special of like, ooh, I've gotten a gift from God and now I need to share it. But in a way of, I know that I'm a piece of something, and I'm like a part to a whole, a construct to a machine that needs my piece in order for it to work. right? And I think that at least from what I feel from the super consciousness of humanity, of the collective consciousness, because if we look at a body, how many cells are in the body and how many of the cells are just taking care of one organ, and then how many cells are actually taking care of the brain, and how many cells are part of this and a part of that, right? And if you think about the cells of consciousness, there are cells that are our consciousness, I mean, the neurons in our brain. Okay, well, that's a small percentage on the whole of the body. So if you look at that at like the global level of humanity and the billions of people, okay, are we going to have to wait until every last person is awoken and not running on their treadmill of habits? Or is there something, you know what I mean? Is that last starling at the tail end of the, you know what I mean? Are we all going to like that, the tipping point, right? That's what I was looking for. The tipping point going to happen. And that 51% go, oh, bing. And then all of a sudden the whole works together as one. I don't know. These are all things that go through my mind on a regular basis of contemplation.
I know, right?
It's like,
I think it's good news that you mentioned meditating before, and we've had the Maharishi effect well studied, and I mentioned that in the book about how a small group of people can constructively influence a massively bigger group of people. Meditating in the city, suddenly the crime rate drops through the floor. So those types of things suggest that we definitely don't need everybody to wake up. Maybe it's just a pessimist in me, but that's just not going to happen. But we maybe it's only 10%, and then the 10% will create a systemic shift that will drag the rest of the people along in it, and they will be influenced and affected by it in a way that hopefully serves them constructively and the rest of us constructively, as opposed to what the elite are trying to orchestrate. But that 10% might be all it takes. It might be 10, 20, whatever it is. It's probably only a small group of people relative to the whole, and then the whole will experience a state change that will be irreversible and will be in a completely different kind of a socio-economic kind of a dynamic from there on out. And I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but we were talking about responsibility, and I think that that's kind of the theme and the challenge and the initiation that we're going through. Because if I look at the way that we've been manipulated, it's primarily through a medical dogma that they've exploited us and manipulated us. And that dogma has at the root of it the abrogation of responsibility and the rejection of responsibility, and making it somebody else's fault, somebody else's problem. It's the germs, it's the microbes in the air. They got in and they made me sick. It's not my fault. All that kind of absolute nonsense, which is provably rubbish 99% of the time. And that belief system and that state of that sort of psyche that's enmeshed in it is what we have been carrying for the last couple of hundred years, or if not longer. And explicitly the medical system and the paradigm. And now that's being used to manipulate us, but at the same time, it's having the double-edged sword effect of waking us up at the same time. And many, many people, as you mentioned, are now choosing to take responsibility and to find another way and to take charge of their lives and to take ownership of themselves and their health and understand what's going on. And that never would have happened if we weren't scammed and manipulated the way that we have been.
Yes, absolutely. So it is, it's the thorn in our side, but it's our biggest gift.
Yeah.
I know
we needed it.
We needed it. Absolutely. The wake-up call, for sure. The very loud alarm that you can't seem to turn off in the morning. Like, hello.
I want to go back to sleep.
Exactly. The dream world is more comfortable. Yeah, fascinating. Wow, what a wonderful conversation. It's really lovely to connect with you.
Yeah, no, it's been fun.
And where can the DNA activation, you said you have that, is that like a practice you're just doing online? Are you doing it with people one-to-one, or is it a group thing, or how to?
We run the actual activation ceremony. We run over Zoom, so it's a global thing. Like anywhere, it doesn't matter where you live.
Right.
Just a matter of syncing up the time zone and jumping on. But
yes.
So if people want to watch the masterclass that explains it in more detail, they can see it at evolveyourself.live.
Okay.
And it will lead you to the sign up link, or if they just want to register, they can message me or email me, and I'll shoot them the link.
Amazing. And as far as just slowly wrapping this up, is there anything else that you'd like to just leave people with around any of the topics we touched on today?
Well, I definitely think they should read my book. I'm biased.
The one
But,
that's on your website now.
yeah, so book one is on the website now.
Okay.
I'm hoping book two will join it later in the year.
Okay, and I'll put of course, your website in the information down below, but do you want to just say that now, just so people have it?
Oh, yeah, sure. So it's brendandmurphy.com. And if you want the book link, it's brendandmurphy.com/TGI. And yeah, it's a journey. That book it's been an awakening point or trigger for a lot of people. And I, some people might not like the idea of saying, oh, well, a book can change your life, but, it changed my life when I read the Holographic Universe. And I've had people say similar things about the experience of reading my book. So I know that if you package information and perspective in a certain way, it can definitely do something very powerful.
Yeah. Wonderful. And is the book like a downloadable book, or something they can buy on, like, just from your website or Amazon, or all of that? All that information is on your website, I'm assuming.
It's on the website, and they can get the ebook or they can get the hard copy. They're both there.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
And anything else moving forward? You're going to have your new books out potentially this year, book one and book
yeah, hopefully. I think I might need a few months to finish the second one and then get it out to people. I've had people messaging me every now and then for 10 years saying, when are you doing the next one?
Yeah. Amazing. Well, the 10-year anniversary, it's looking forward to that. Yeah.
I think it's got to be the 10-year anniversary.
Yeah, I love it. All right. Well, I am so grateful that I had this opportunity to interview you and get to know you a little more and about your universe, the Truthyverse. And I know in just sharing with people, his podcast, the Truthyverse, is on all, I would say, most apps, yep. Right? Yeah. Spotify and Apple Podcasts and such. And some really great interviews on there of things that I have listened to. And also you can see them, right? They're on your website as well, correct?
Yeah, well, I upload the videos to all the major.
Okay, so you do also video and audio. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a YouTube page as well?
I do. Not all of the videos make it there because of the censorship.
Oh, right. Of course.
Yeah. Yes, so I upload to BitChute, Rumble, Odyssey. They're my sort of main ones.
Okay. Fantastic. Yeah. But most of that information is going to be on your website, right?
I haven't done a lot of putting the podcast on the website. Although actually, now that you mention it, there is a section down the bottom of the screen that does have the podcast running. So
yeah, that's what I was going to say, because they popped up every time I went there, like, oh, do you want to listen, kind of thing. And I was like,
I forget about that.
Yeah. See what you created? A self-sustaining website. Yeah, exactly. Wonderful. Well, it's really been a great pleasure, and so glad to be international and 7 hours ahead, and you're starting your day and I'm ending mine. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed it. And, appreciate your work and your efforts out there in the world, helping people and waking people up. It's awesome.
One little step at a time, as we all are. Great.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I will sign out to all of you out there. It's always so funny with Zooms. I'm like, where do I look? Am I looking at you in the camera or looking up here in the camera?
Find that button.
Exactly. So guys, Lara Helena here with Courageous Love Now podcast. I'm so happy that you're tuning in for my first interview of 2022 with Brendan D. Murphy. This has been such a stimulating conversation. I say that to you too. Such a stimulating conversation. I need more of them in my life. I'm tucked away in my attic here in the house, all the time. So just online. But stay tuned for more. And thanks so much. Go over and check out Brendan D. Murphy's website and check out his podcast and download his book. And for all of you out there, stay true to you, stay authentic, follow your light wherever it takes you, and ride that adventure with a lot of joy. This is Lara Helena, Courageous Lara, over and out. Hello, all you beautiful listeners. It is that time for a little shameless self-promotion. If you've enjoyed this podcast or any of the previous podcasts I have recorded, I would be so grateful if you could subscribe and rate and possibly review down below. So whatever your podcast listening app is, there is usually an area where you can leave a review of what you thought. Even just a few words can make a huge difference. And as I am new to podcasting, it will make even a bigger difference to just get the word out there and also see what you thought. Thanks so much for your support and keep on listening.